Adrian Cole never thought he would be the one to represent Earth in the Great Council of the Galaxy. He was not the most famous diplomat, nor the most experienced, but perhaps that was why he had been chosen. Earth wanted to send someone honest, someone who would not play endless games of power and pride. Adrian was known for speaking with sincerity, and maybe that was the rare quality needed in a place filled with leaders who spoke in careful riddles. When he arrived at the council station, he felt as though he had stepped into a dream. The station was not like any human design. Its walls curved like flowing rivers of light. Its ceilings opened into skies that showed stars glittering beyond, and every corridor seemed alive with color. Delegates from dozens of worlds moved gracefully through the halls. Some were tall and shining like crystal, others small with quick darting eyes. Some floated, some walked, some glided silently over the floor. To Adrian it was overwhelming yet also beautiful. Humanity was only beginning to take its first steps into this vast community. And here he was, standing among legends. The opening ceremony was held in the Grand Hall, a chamber so wide that Adrian could not see the farthest wall clearly. A ring of light floated above the floor, and inside it leaders of different empires took their places. Each wore the symbols of their people and each moved with practiced dignity. Adrian adjusted the simple dark blue uniform Earth had given him. Compared to the grand robes and glowing crowns of others, he felt plain, yet he carried himself with quiet strength. It was then he noticed her, Princess Leora, heir to the throne of the Aelari Empire, stood near the center of the hall. She was taller than most humans, her form slender yet commanding. Her skin shimmered faintly, not in a way that seemed artificial, but as though her very being carried the light of distant stars. Her eyes were a deep shade of silver, calm yet unreadable, and her long hair moved softly as though touched by unseen winds. She did not smile, nor did she frown. Her presence was still and distant, as though she lived behind a wall none could reach. Adrian had heard of her before. Stories whispered that she was wise beyond her years, trained from birth to lead with logic and discipline. She was admired across the galaxy, yet also feared, for she rarely showed emotion. To speak with her was said to be like speaking with a statue of marble, beautiful but cold. Still, Adrian found himself watching her, curious. She seemed separate even in this gathering of rulers. Others bowed to her, offered respectful greetings, but she only nodded lightly and turned her gaze elsewhere. It was as if no one truly saw her as more than a symbol of her empire. The ceremony began, speeches flowing one after another. Words of unity, of cooperation, of strength. Adrian listened, though his attention often wandered back to the princess. He wondered what it must be like to live a life where every step was measured, where every word was weighed against tradition. When the speeches ended, delegates were free to mingle. Groups formed, discussing trade, peace, and power. Adrian walked slowly through the hall, trying not to appear lost. He reminded himself that he was here to observe, to learn, and to represent Earth with dignity. Yet he could not shake the thought of the princess standing alone. Finally, his steps carried him closer to her. She stood near one of the great pillars, speaking briefly to a noble from another system. When their conversation ended, she remained still, her gaze drifting over the crowd as though searching for something she could not find. Adrian hesitated. His mind warned him to be careful. Approaching royalty was not a simple matter, especially royalty from an empire as powerful as hers. Yet another part of him, the part that valued honesty above caution, told him that she was still a person. And people, no matter how high their station, sometimes needed to hear a simple truth. He took a breath and stepped forward. "Good evening," he said gently, his voice calm. The princess turned her silver eyes toward him. For a moment she only studied him, as though weighing every detail of his appearance. Her expression did not change, but her attention was sharp. "You are the representative from Earth," she said, her tone smooth, almost melodic, but without warmth. "Yes," Adrian replied with a respectful nod. "Adrian Cole." She inclined her head slightly, a gesture that seemed both polite and distant. "Your world is young among the stars. It is rare for such a world to hold a place here." Adrian could have answered with a formal statement about Earth's goals or about humanity's hopes for peace, but as he looked at her, he saw not just a princess of an empire, but a woman who had probably heard the same ceremonial words 1,000 times. So instead, he chose the simplest truth in his heart. "You look beautiful today," he said. For the first time, her expression changed. The princess's silver eyes widened just slightly, a flicker of surprise breaking through her calm mask. It was not the words themselves, perhaps, but the way they were spoken. Without strategy, without calculation, only with human sincerity. She did not speak at once. Instead, she seemed to study him more carefully, as though trying to understand why he had said such a thing. Around them, the hall remained alive with conversation, yet in that moment it felt as if silence had fallen between the two. Finally, she answered, her voice softer than before. Few speak to me in such a way. Adrian smiled lightly, though not mockingly. Maybe they should. Her gaze lingered on him. Then, almost too subtle to notice, the corner of her lips curved upward, not a full smile but a trace of one, as though she was testing the shape of it for the first time in years. Their exchange was brief, yet it carried weight. To Adrian, it was a small step, a moment of human honesty. To Leora, it was something far rarer, a reminder that beneath titles and duties, someone had seen her simply as herself. Before more could be said, another delegate approached her with formal greetings, and she turned away to answer. Adrian stepped back, not wishing to intrude further. Yet as he walked away, he felt a quiet certainty. Something had shifted, something delicate yet undeniable. The princess of the Alari Empire, known for her cold dignity, had been surprised by a simple human truth. And though neither of them could have known it, that moment would change the course of their lives, and perhaps even the fate of the galaxy.
The council meetings moved into their second week, and the station grew busier with every passing day. Delegates hurried from chamber to chamber, voices rising and falling in debates that often seemed endless. Agreements were drafted, then broken, then reshaped again. To Adrian, it was both fascinating and exhausting. He had expected politics, but he had not realized how much of it was performance, smiles that hid suspicion, handshakes that meant nothing, and speeches designed more for appearances than truth. Through all of it, Adrian carried himself with calm patience. He listened more than he spoke, asked questions instead of giving commands. At first, some dismissed him as unimportant, a newcomer with no great power behind him. Yet others began to notice the way he spoke, direct, clear, without games. Slowly, his quiet presence gained a kind of respect. But none of this mattered to him as much as the moments when he caught sight of Princess Lyra. She was always there, standing tall in the gatherings, her silver eyes watching everything. She spoke with precision, her words chosen like finely cut stones. To others, she seemed distant, untouchable. Yet Adrian remembered the small flicker of surprise in her eyes when he had spoken to her, the faint curve of her lips that almost became a smile. He could not forget it. At first, he told himself it was only curiosity. But when he noticed her gaze following him once or twice across the hall, he began to wonder if she felt the same. One evening, after a long session, Adrian walked into one of the quieter gardens of the station. The gardens were meant as places of rest, designed with plants from many worlds. Streams of glowing water flowed between the stones, and the air smelled faintly of flowers that shimmered under the artificial sky. He sat on a bench, letting his mind rest. Footsteps sounded softly behind him. He turned, and there she was. Princess Lyra stood among the silver-leaved trees, her figure framed by soft light. For a moment, Adrian thought she might pass by, but instead, she walked toward him. "You seek silence," she said, her voice calm. Adrian smiled lightly. "Silence helps me think. After so many speeches, it feels like air after a storm." She studied him, her expression as steady as ever. Then, to his surprise, she sat on the bench beside him, though leaving a respectful space. "On my world, silence is valued. Words are used with care. Yet here, silence seems rare." Adrian glanced at her. Silence can say a lot too. Sometimes more than words. For the first time, she turned her face slightly toward him, silver eyes reflecting the garden lights. You are unusual for a human diplomat. Many would try to impress me with fine speeches. You do not. Adrian chuckled softly. I am not very good at speeches. I prefer to say what I mean. And when you told me I was beautiful, she said quietly, did you also mean that? The question caught him off guard. He looked at her, seeing the calm mask she wore, but also something beneath it, something searching. He nodded. I meant it. Her gaze lingered on him. Then she looked away, her hands resting gently on her lap. On my world, beauty is not spoken of. It is considered a distraction. Leaders are judged only for their strength, their wisdom, their control. No one has ever spoken to me as you did. Adrian thought about that. He realized how heavy her life must have been, shaped only by duty and expectation. Maybe that's why I said it. Because someone should remind you that you're not only a leader, you're also a person. She was silent for a long time, as though weighing his words. Then, softly, she said, strange, but your words do not trouble me. They stay in my thoughts. From that night on, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes it seemed by chance, sometimes perhaps not. They walked together in the gardens, shared small meals in quiet corners of the station, and spoke of many things. At first, the conversations were simple questions about Earth, its oceans, its mountains, its people. She seemed fascinated by his descriptions of music, of paintings, of festivals where people danced in the streets without reason other than joy. On my world, she told him once, there are no such festivals. Every gathering has purpose. Every step must be measured. Then I hope, Adrian replied with a smile, that one day you'll see one of ours. You might like it. Sometimes, their talks turned deeper. She asked why humans value freedom so highly, even when it leads to mistakes. Adrian explained that mistakes are how people learn, that choice gives meaning to life. She listened carefully, her silver eyes thoughtful, as though hearing such ideas for the first time. In return, she told him about the weight of her role. How every decision she made was judged by the elders of her empire, how every smile or frown was studied for hidden meaning. I was taught that my heart belongs not to me, but to the empire, she said. Adrian looked at her gently. And do you believe that? For once, she did not answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the stars beyond the garden dome. I believed it, until I met you. Their bond grew quietly, but it did not go unnoticed. Delegates began to whisper. A human diplomat spending time with the Ilari princess was unusual, perhaps even dangerous. Some wondered if Earth was seeking favor. Others feared that Adrian was trying to influence her. Adrian heard the whispers but ignored them. He was not seeking power. All he wanted was to know her better, to understand the person behind the title. One evening, as they walked along a balcony overlooking the glowing rivers of the station, Lyra paused. Do you realize what they say about us? Yes, Adrian admitted. But I don't care. She turned to face him, her expression calm but her voice lower, almost fragile. And if the whispers grow louder? If my people see me as weak because I choose to speak with you? Adrian hesitated, then answered softly, then I hope you'll remember that strength isn't only about power. Sometimes it's about having the courage to be yourself. Her silver eyes searched his face. For a moment, she seemed to battle with something inside her. Then, slowly, she nodded. In that quiet space, something shifted between them. Their connection was no longer curiosity, no longer just small conversations. It was becoming trust, a bond built not on politics but on something deeper. Yet neither of them could deny the truth. Every step they took closer to one another also drew the attention of the galaxy. And while Adrian saw only a woman learning to find her own voice, others saw danger in the change awakening within their princess. For now, though, in the calm of the balcony and the soft glow of distant stars, Adrian and Lyra simply stood together. Two souls from different worlds, finding in each other a glimpse of something rare. Something worth risking whispers for. The council station was never quiet. Even when the halls grew dim and many chambers closed for the night, there was always movement, delegates speaking in low voices, envoys rushing with sealed messages, servants carrying trays of food and water for long discussions that never seemed to end. For Adrian, this constant activity had become familiar. Yet now he noticed a change. Wherever he walked, he felt eyes following him. Conversations seemed to stop when he entered a room. Whispers began as soon as he passed. At first, he tried to ignore it. He told himself he was imagining things. But as the days passed, it became clear. The whispers were about him and about Princess Lyra. One morning, while reviewing reports in the council library, Adrian overheard two delegates speaking nearby. They did not see him at first. "It is unusual," one said, his voice sharp. "The princess speaks often with the human." "Too often." "Perhaps she is only curious," the other replied cautiously. The first shook his head. "Curiosity is not the way of the Ilari. If she listens to him, she may begin to doubt the old ways. That would weaken the empire. And a weak empire threatens us all." Adrian quietly left before they could notice him, but their words stayed in his mind. He had known that his time with Lyra might raise questions. He had not expected it to stir fear. Later that evening, he met Lyra in one of the high gardens, where crystal flowers bloomed under artificial starlight. She stood near the railing, looking out at the endless stars beyond the glass dome. When she turned to him, he could see that she too had heard the whispers. "They are speaking of us," she said softly. Adrian nodded. "I know." Her silver eyes were steady, but there was a shadow within them. "They wonder why I choose to walk with you, why I choose to listen. They think you are trying to bend me to your will. And are you worried they are right?" Adrian asked carefully. For a moment she did not answer. Then she shook her head. "No. You speak with honesty. That is why I return. Yet the more I listen to you, the more I see the cage I have lived in all my life. And that truth is dangerous. To them, change is a threat." Adrian felt the weight of her words. He wanted to tell her not to worry, that everything would be fine. But he respected her too much to speak in false comfort. Instead, he said, "Then maybe change is exactly what they need." Lyra's gaze lingered on him. For the briefest moment, her calm mask slipped, and he saw something vulnerable, something human in her expression. Then she looked away. "You risk much by standing near me. Are you not afraid?" Adrian shook his head. "No. What I fear is silence, seeing something true and never speaking it." Her lips curved slightly, the faintest trace of that almost smile he had seen before. "Strange human. You speak simply, yet your words weigh heavily." Over the following days, the whispers grew louder. Some delegates avoided Adrian, offering only stiff nods when he greeted them. Others watched him openly, their eyes cold. Yet there were also a few who seemed curious. They noticed the way Princess Lyra's tone softened when she spoke in council, how she no longer sounded like a statue of stone but like someone alive with thought and choice. One evening, during a private dinner hosted by the council, Adrian found himself seated across from a tall figure cloaked in robes of deep green. The delegate leaned forward and spoke in a low voice. "You are brave, human. But bravery and foolishness are close." Adrian met his gaze calmly. "I speak with the princess as one person to another. Is that foolish?" The delegate's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps not. But remember, she is not free to choose her path. She belongs to her people. If you give her new ideas, they may see it as an attack on their traditions." Adrian did not answer at once. He understood the warning. But he also knew that what had begun between him and Lyra was no longer something he could step away from. It was not about politics. It was about truth. The very next day, the weight of suspicion became clear. During a council session, a debate broke out between two great civilizations over trade routes near the edge of the galaxy. Voices rose, tempers flared, and it seemed the hall would erupt into chaos. At that moment, Princess Lyra stood and spoke. Her voice was calm, but different from before. Instead of repeating old rules or reciting ancient laws, she spoke of fairness, of understanding, of finding balance not through strength but through compassion. The hall grew quiet as she spoke, her silver eyes steady, her words carrying a rare power. When she finished, silence filled the chamber. Some delegates nodded with respect. Others whispered in alarm. Adrian sat watching, his chest tight with pride and worry. He could hear the whispers even as he left the hall. She speaks with the voice of the human. The princess is changing. This is dangerous. That evening, Lyra sought him out in the garden once more. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed a storm within. "They will not forgive this easily," she said. "They think I am abandoning tradition." "You spoke truth," Adrian replied firmly. "And they heard it? Even if they are afraid, they cannot unhear it?" She looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "You do not understand. In my empire, truth is not enough. Only loyalty matters. To question the old ways is to betray them." Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then maybe it's time someone shows them that loyalty without truth is empty." Her eyes searched his face, and for a moment it seemed she wanted to say more, something deeper. But then she turned away, her hands clasped tightly before her. "I do not know what path lies ahead. Only that your words have changed me. And that may cost us both dearly." Adrian felt the truth of her warning. He had not come here seeking influence or power. All he had done was speak with honesty. Yet somehow, those simple moments had begun to stir a storm across the galaxy. As he watched her walk away, silver hair catching the light of the artificial stars, he realized that their bond was no longer a quiet secret. The council had noticed. The empires had noticed. And the galaxy itself was beginning to shift. The council chambers were heavy with tension. For weeks, arguments had grown between the Kulnar Dominion and the Vyuri Union, two civilizations older and stronger than most. Their fleets patrolled opposite sides of the same trade routes, and each accused the other of trespass. Small skirmishes had already broken out on the edge of their borders. Now, before the gathered council, their leaders spoke with rising anger. Adrian sat among the delegates, listening carefully. He could feel the air thicken as accusations flew back and forth. Each side demanded justice. Each threatened war. Princess Lyra sat at the center table, her silver eyes calm as she observed the storm of words. The Illyri Empire had always stood as a pillar of neutrality. Her role was to keep balance, to weigh disputes without leaning to either side. Yet Adrian noticed a subtle change in her. She did not look distant as before. She looked thoughtful, as though searching for something beyond the traditions of her empire. The Kulnar ambassador struck his staff against the floor. The Union steals from our roots. We will not allow this insult to continue. If the council does not condemn them, we will answer with force. The Viuri envoy rose at once, his voice sharp. Lies. It is the Dominion who crosses into our borders, seizing ships and trade. If they want war, they will have it. The hall erupted with voices. Some called for calm, others shouted demands. Adrian leaned forward, his chest tight. He had seen this pattern before on Earth. Two sides blinded by pride, unable to step back. He wondered if the galaxy would truly fall into chaos because no one dared speak of another way. Then Princess Lyra rose. Her presence alone silenced the chamber. Delegates turned to her, expecting her usual cold balance words that spoke of order without choosing a side. But Adrian, watching closely, saw something new in her gaze. She began softly, her voice carrying like music across the chamber. I hear the anger in your voices. I see the fear in your hearts. You believe only force can answer force. You believe only strength can protect honor. But I ask you to look beyond pride. What do you truly seek? Is it war or is it peace? Murmurs rippled through the hall. No one had expected such words. Lyra continued, her tone firm yet gentle. Strength is not only in armies. It is in the courage to step back when pride demands you step forward. It is in the wisdom to see your enemy as someone who also fears, who also suffers. If you choose war, you will destroy not only each other but the countless lives that depend on your trade and your protection. But if you choose peace, you may build something greater than victory, you may build trust. The chamber fell silent. Adrian felt his heart race. These were not the words of Illyri tradition. These were words shaped by something new, something human. He realized in that moment just how deeply their conversations had touched her. The Kulnar ambassador's face hardened. Your words sound noble, princess, but they are weak. Only power ensures survival. The Viuri envoy nodded in agreement. Compassion does not guard borders. Yet others in the chamber shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes, as if ashamed. A few even murmured approval. Adrian could see the storm gathering. By speaking this way, Lyra had broken the expected role of her empire. She had chosen not the cold balance of neutrality but the warm light of compassion. It was bold. It was dangerous. When the session ended, the council hall buzzed with restless energy. Delegates gathered in corners, whispering fiercely. Adrian felt the weight of many stares upon him, more direct now than ever. That night, he found Lyra waiting in the garden. She stood among the crystal flowers, her silver hair shining softly in the starlight. When she turned to him, he saw not calm dignity but quiet determination. You heard me, she said. I heard, Adrian replied, stepping closer. And I was proud. Her eyes lingered on him. I spoke with your voice. No, he said gently. You spoke with your own. You only needed a reminder that you had it. For a moment, she lowered her gaze, her hands clasping lightly before her. You do not understand what I risk. The council may whisper, but my empire will act. They will not forgive me for stepping beyond tradition. Adrian took a slow breath. Then why did you do it? Her silver eyes lifted to his, steady and clear. Because I was tired of silence. Because I wanted to be more than a symbol. And because your words taught me that truth matters, even when it is difficult. Adrian felt a warmth rise in his chest. He wished he could protect her from the storm she was stepping into, but he knew she did not need protection. She needed someone who would stand beside her. The days that followed proved her right. Delegates from powerful empires approached Lyra with sharp warnings. Some accused her of being swayed by Earth, a young and untested world. Others said her compassion was weakness that would invite danger. Yet there were also those who began to support her, quietly at first, then more openly. A spark had been lit, and it was spreading. Adrian saw both the hope and the danger. One evening, as they walked together along the station's balcony, he spoke his worry aloud. If they turn against you, what will you do? She was silent for a long time, looking out at the endless stars. Then she said, I will not turn back. I have spoken my truth. If that truth costs me my place, then perhaps my place was never mine to begin with. Her words struck him deeply. He realized that she was no longer the distant princess he had first met. She was becoming something more, a leader willing to risk everything for honesty. But as he looked at her, he also knew the whispers would not remain whispers for long. The storm was coming, and it would test them both. For now, though, they stood together under the stars, silent but united. Two voices among many, daring to believe that kindness could be stronger than pride. And somewhere deep inside, Adrian felt the first spark of certainty. The galaxy was changing, and it had begun with a simple truth spoken to a princess who had never heard it before. The storm finally broke. The whispers that had spread quietly through the council halls grew into open voices. Delegates no longer hid their suspicions. Some accused Adrian of placing dangerous ideas into Princess Lyra's mind. Others went further, claiming Earth was using him to gain influence over one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. But the sharpest voices came not from the council, but from within the Ilari Empire itself. Messages arrived daily from the elders of Lyra's court. They demanded that she return home at once. They reminded her that her duty was not to kindness or change, but to the strict traditions that had guided their people for centuries. Still, Lyra did not leave. She remained at the station, attending each council session, standing tall even as the weight of her empire pressed upon her. To those around her, she seemed as calm as ever. But Adrian, who had come to know her more deeply, could see the quiet battle in her eyes. One evening, as they walked once more in the garden, she stopped beneath the silver-leaved trees. Her hands were folded in front of her, her gaze lifted toward the stars beyond the dome. My people call me home, she said softly. If I refuse, they may strip me of my place. If I obey, I betray what I have spoken here. Adrian stood beside her, silent for a moment. Then he said, What do you want, Lyra? Not what they demand. Not what the council expects. You. What do you want? Her silver eyes turned to him, shining faintly in the starlight. For a moment she seemed almost lost. Then, slowly, she answered, I want to speak with my true voice. I want to lead not with silence, but with honesty. I want to be free. Adrian's chest tightened. He knew the choice before her was no small matter. It was not only her future, but the shape of her empire, perhaps even the balance of the council. And yet he saw clearly that she had already made her decision. The following day, the council gathered in the grand hall once more. The chamber was tense. Delegates whispered to one another, watching Lyra as she took her place at the center. Adrian sat in his seat, his heart heavy with anticipation. The High Chancellor of the Council struck the staff of light against the floor. "Princess Lyra of the Ilari Empire," he said, his voice echoing through the hall, "your people have spoken. They question your path. They fear you have been swayed. The Council now gives you voice to answer. What say you to these charges?" All eyes turned to her. For a long moment, Lyra stood in silence. Her silver gaze moved across the chamber, meeting the eyes of each delegate. She looked calm, but Adrian could feel the weight of the moment pressing upon her. At last, she spoke. "You are correct," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I have been changed. I have listened to voices I was never taught to hear. I have seen truths I was told to ignore. And I have chosen to speak not only as a daughter of the Ilari, but as myself." The chamber stirred. Some frowned, others leaned forward in surprise. "My people taught me that strength is silence, that duty is obedience, that tradition is unchanging. But I have learned that true strength is not in silence. It is in courage, the courage to speak even when your voice shakes. The courage to show kindness when others demand pride. The courage to listen, not only to the powerful, but to the small and unheard." Her eyes swept the hall, and for a moment they lingered on Adrian. Then she continued, "If this council fears that I have been swayed, then hear me now. Yes, I have. I have been swayed by the simple truth that compassion is not weakness. That honesty is not danger. That freedom is not betrayal. These are not only human truths. They are truths for all who dare to see them." A hush fell over the hall. Adrian could feel the air shift, as though the very walls held their breath. Lyra lifted her head, her voice stronger now. "If my empire chooses to strip me of my title for these words, then so be it. I will not regret speaking them. For the first time, I have spoken as myself. And that, no matter the cost, is freedom." Silence followed. Not the silence of indifference, but the silence of hearts struck by words too honest to ignore. Then voices rose, some angry, some admiring, some fearful. The chamber erupted into debate. Some delegates declared her reckless. Others praised her courage. A few even admitted they had long wished to speak as she had but lacked the strength. Adrian sat quietly, his heart pounding. He had never been prouder. He knew how much it had cost her to stand there, to break from the weight of centuries. And yet she had done it. That night, Lyra found him on the balcony overlooking the endless stars. The station lights glowed softly around them, but beyond the glass, the galaxy stretched into infinity. She stood beside him in silence for a moment. Then she said, "It is done. The council has heard me. My empire will not forgive me, but I do not fear them." Adrian looked at her, his voice low. "You were extraordinary." Her lips curved into that faint, rare smile he had come to cherish. "No, I was only myself. You reminded me that I could be." They stood together, side by side, gazing into the stars. For a long while, no words were needed. The bond between them was no longer a fragile seed. It had grown into something strong, something that neither empire nor council could easily erase. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to shift. Some empires resisted her words, clinging tightly to old ways. But others began to question, to listen, to wonder if kindness might indeed hold power equal to force. A quiet movement began, small but spreading, sparked by the courage of one princess who dared to speak differently. And for Adrian, it was a reminder of humanity's place among the stars. Earth had no vast fleets, no ancient traditions, no empire stretching across galaxies. But it had something else, something simple, something powerful. The ability to touch hearts with honesty. The ability to remind even the strongest that they were still human, or whatever their form beneath their crowns and duties. One compliment, spoken with sincerity, had changed everything. As the station rotated slowly above the stars, Adrian turned to Lyra. She met his gaze, her silver eyes steady, no longer distant, no longer hidden behind walls. And in that quiet, unspoken moment, both of them knew the truth. This was not an ending. It was the beginning of something greater.